Hey, welcome to WagerTalk's Last Call. I am Kelly Stewart at KellyInVegas on all your social channels, where each and every Sunday we are bringing you up-to-date information, actionable info, and some of those late plays all the way up until kickoff. This show is for you. I said this last week. I can just text Art DeCesare. I can just call Yanni the Greek. And of course, I can always reach out to Steve Merrill to answer any of my college football questions. So if you guys have a question, a comment, even a concern, feel free to drop it in your perspective chat. We are live on Twitter/X, TikTok, WagerTalk's Instagram page, and of course, we are always live here on WagerTalk's YouTube channel. Let's get into this. Art DeCesare from the Westgate Superbook is up first. Last week, Art had tons of great information for us. Art, coming in hot. I'd like to thank you for that late ad of Notre Dame and UNLV. You and John Murray, well, you're live from his office, gave me that extra little push that I needed to bet on those two teams, and subsequently saved my Saturday because I went 1-4 last week. So thank you for that. What have you got for this weekend?
Yeah, a lot. I mean, obviously, the week one buzz was really nice, so it was nice to have college football back. And, the games, not that there's a lot of marquee games. Obviously, we got the big one in the morning with Texas and Michigan, which will obviously see a lot of handle, a lot of right. Early on in the slate, Penn State's going to be a big need for us. We took a lot of Bowling Green money at plus 35. We were as low as 33.5. We've now ticked back up to 34. But Penn State going to be a very big early need for us today.
Are we thinking that people are just betting against what they saw last week? We saw a last-minute money come in on West Virginia. I was on West Virginia, and that one wasn't even close, Art. So what, are they just thinking maybe last week was a farce? Are they not buying Drew Aller's new 20-pound weight gain? What's going on?
Yeah, no, I think a lot of times, too, it's just the number. If 35's sitting out there and people look at 5 touchdowns, they say, hey, we're going to take a shot here. And, like you said, Penn State, listen, they did what they had to do. They went on the road and won in Morgantown. But 35 is a big number to lay, even though it is at home. So I think that was the thought process on the early Bowling Green money.
Yeah, I can kind of see that. Look, Penn State, we know that head coach James Franklin always knows the spread. So keep that in the back of your mind when you are betting on or against him. Art, you mentioned Texas, Michigan. I got 7.5 with Michigan on Wednesday. Now we're seeing 6.5. Are you guys seeing pretty good two-way action here? Lopsided? What's going on with this big noon game?
Yeah, so this is an interesting game. So early on, 6.5 money came in on Texas. We went to the 7.5. You obviously saw the buyback there. We sat at 7 for a while. And then early this morning, we moved back to 6.5. It's still probably 60-40 ticket count on Texas. But, it's one of those games because they laid 6.5 and took 7.5. We really don't want the game to land 7. That wouldn't be great. So we want to avoid. We would love to avoid that. Yeah, we do not want to get middled, so that's a big thing for us. But the early indicating money was on Texas at the 6.5, but we did go back there because we had to follow the market this morning.
All right, another early money move that John Murray explained to me was Tulane against my alma mater. Said the sharp guys took 10, but now it's back up to 9.5. I'm seeing everybody in the world on Kansas State, rightfully so. Nobody knows about Troy's former head coach, now going to be the head coach of Tulane, John Sumrall. We'll see what they can come up with, but I'll tell you this, as a K-State fan, this one has me very, very uneasy.
Yeah, and is it maybe a look-ahead spot? They play Friday against Arizona. Right? I mean, that could be a possibility. I think the Tulane money coming in early at plus 10 clearly was sharp money. And there really hasn't been that much of a nibble back on K-State, even though the line has moved back towards that 10. But obviously 10 is gone because of the early sharp money.
Do you think if we see 10 again, it will just immediately get nabbed? Or do you think that's something that maybe our audience needs to be looking towards?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things. I don't think it gets back there, but obviously if it does, that won't last long. Sometimes if a number does hit its resistance point, it can get back there. I mean, it's not that it can't, but most of the time you miss it, especially in college. NFL, they can go back and forth. You can kind of get the best of both numbers. Sometimes college, it feels like when the number's gone, it's gone.
Yeah, usually that is the case. Any other noon needs before we move on to the 3:30 slate?
No, nothing like that really that jumps out that much. I mean, just a quick rundown of our needs for the day. Obviously, I mentioned Penn State. I'm going to mention Auburn. Auburn is, I believe that's a 12:30 game. So Auburn's a need, Toledo's a need, ECU's a need, Air Force, Oregon, as we get further down the board. So that's about, 6 or 7 of our top needs for the day.
Well, I don't want to hear that as somebody who has a Cal plus 14 in pocket. I had this question asked to me this morning on another show, Art. If Auburn gets down to 10, I think we saw 10.5, 11 on the odds screen this morning. By the way, WagerTalk.com/odds. If you're looking to shop around, you can even make the Superbook your preferred sportsbook on there by moving to the first slate like I have them. If you think it gets down to 10 before kick, which we've got about an hour or two, and I've got a 14 in pocket, do you ever recommend middling? I would have a 4-point middle.
I think in college, no. I get the strategy, but yeah, 10.5 now, and great for you get that 14 because we've seen nothing but Cal money. And I mean, obviously there was a lot of, I want to say, people betting against, a lot of sharp money that came in on Auburn's win total under this year. A lot of people fading Auburn to not have a good year. And obviously that was too high of a number at 14, even 13.5, 12.5. It just kept going down. I mean, if we do get to 10, there will be a point where people do buy back. But I think if you're sitting there, Cal, with a 14, I would just ride by 14.
Yeah, that's basically what I said. I said middling is for men. I don't have the cojones or really the bankroll to try to do that. And then I would be very mad at myself if I didn't hit the middle and I had a nice CLV trophy with Cal plus 14. Here's a game I wanted to touch on because I've done about 40 shows this week, Art, and not a single person has broken down this game for me. The Cyhawk game, Iowa State currently 2.5 now. They were 3 all week. At number 21, Iowa. Iowa looked great offensively last week. Is that all you're seeing come in here? Is Iowa minus 2.5, minus 3 money?
Yeah, you definitely see that. And it's funny. The total is probably the more interesting thing in this game because it's such a low total and Iowa totals are such a buzz and always talked about. We hit as low as 35, and then you saw it start creeping back up this morning, 35.5, 36. The public blindly takes low totals. They take them over. They just do. They see low totals, they take them, even if they don't know anything about Iowa. They go, how can a game be 35? Sharps usually want to find a spot to take them at their highest and go under, especially in the Iowa game. But it's interesting that we creeped back up a full point. And you're right. It's going to be laying 2.5 with Iowa, taking +3 with Iowa State, and even taking a shot with Iowa State on the money line.
Yeah, I've considered Matt Campbell as an underdog, but wow, Kirk Ferentz just owns him in this series, and that made me just uneasy enough to say I'm going to stay away. As always, guys, if you have a question for Art DeCesare from the Westgate Superbook, drop it in your perspective chat. We'll try to get to your question. Also, VR is going to be joining us here in a few minutes, Yanni the Greek, and finishing up with all of your college football questions, Steve Merrill from WagerTalk.com. All right, 2 more games I want to hit on personally, Art, because I'm selfish like that. Kansas is taking on Illinois in Champaign, and I have a nice 5.5 trophy just sitting on the proverbial shelf right behind me. This one's down to 4.5. I just saw on College Game Day before we started the show, and I thought, oh boy, am I on the right track? Can Illinois win this game outright?
They probably can. I mean, obviously you see, when you get, and you know better than anyone because you love your college football underdogs, when you're in the under 10-point range of college football, the underdog's always in play. I mean, even up to 14, they're in play for the most part. But obviously you did see some Illinois money come in. It obviously whacked that down a little bit to 4.5. I think the total's interesting. I think there's going to be points in the game. 57.5 is a high total, but I think there will be points. I feel like over is the move in the game.
Ooh, over in the KU game. Okay, last but not least, one team that I considered as my underdog earlier in the week. I do a show with Clay Travis on Tuesdays called The Fade. He's a big Tennessee fan. I said, hey, no offense, but North Carolina State is on my underdog list. I just held off for about 12 hours, and that line went from 7.5 to 9.5 in the blink of an eye, and I thought, okay, I might be dead wrong here. Tennessee looked really good in their opener. NC State struggled. Now we've got a game on a neutral site. Are you seeing nothing but Tennessee money coming in?
So it's what we talked about, right? What you saw last week. NC State was awful. They were not great in the game. I mean, it might take a little bit for Grayson McCall to get kind of rolling with NC State. We know how good the Tennessee quarterback is, probably a dark horse for the Heisman. Not really a dark horse, but, he's kind of maybe off the radar a little bit. Tennessee opened 7, and it was nothing but Tennessee money, a flood of it. Hit 10, and then we had the sharp buyback at 10. And we went back to 8.5. Now we've creeped back up to 9. Tennessee's actually, because of the good amount of money that we took from a respected sharp player, put down a nice 5-figure bet on NC State. We actually are going to need Tennessee right now. Now, listen, Tennessee will be in all money line parlays, so you got to kind of combat that a little bit. And then the public's on the over in the game, even though the total's gone up. So the public has gotten the best of the number on the over, 59.5 to 60.5. I can't trust NC State yet. I know it's a big number to lay, but you are laying it in neutral site. I think Tennessee's a dark horse to make the playoff and make a nice run here. I would lay it with Tennessee.
I want you to touch on something you just mentioned in regards, and then we'll get to Titan CT thoughts on Virginia Tech and Marshall. So when the bookmakers take a large bet, right, sometimes they move off of that bet if it's a respected bettor, and sometimes it's just a big house player, and they make decisions accordingly as the week goes on. Can you kind of explain the process? I walk in, I make a $150,000 bet on just a random underdog. I maybe gamble a little bit in the casino. You guys know who I am. What is the protocol here for those types of big bets? Because I think it doesn't get talked about enough, that the way you actually are supposed to book these games.
It's a great question. And we have plenty of house players, and especially during football season. They want to come into town during football season, and maybe they're a big-time craps player or a blackjack player, but they like to come to the casino and like to come into the sports book and put down, $50,000 bet. And listen, it's something we look at, and if it maybe totally lopsides our game, yeah, maybe we can kind of sell a little bit back. But a house player is a house player. They're not a sharp, respected bettor. And a guy who comes in and maybe even only bets $5,000 and it's a bet we respect, we can move pretty heavily off of it because it's someone we book to their action. So there is plenty of that. I mean, listen, we had a great Monday because we had a house player drop basically 120,000 on Florida State's money line. And we just said, okay, that's what it is. What it is. You want to put $120,000 to basically win, 12 or 15 grand. We're going to live with it. I mean, those are the type of bets we'll take all day.
All right, let's go back to Titan CT question about Virginia Tech Marshall. So we talked about how bad teams looked last week. I think they were 13.5, 14 on the road at Vanderbilt, loses outright. That is the Hokies. Now 20-point favorites versus Marshall. 53.5 is the total. Are the bettors coming in saying, all right, here's a bounce back spot for Virginia Tech?
They certainly are, because the number was 17, Kelly. So obviously you saw the initial money come in at 17, and then you saw it at 18.5, and then we've gotten all the way to 20. It's been nothing but Virginia Tech money. So, I mean, it's one of those things where Virginia Tech got a lot of love in the offseason, too. A lot of people betting them to make the college football playoff. I saw a lot of experts picking them to make the college football playoff. So I think maybe they say, hey, it's a one-week thing. This is a big bounce-back spot. And obviously, if they don't perform this week, then maybe you could see the whole tide shift where people start fading them and look, hey, maybe this is a disaster of a season. And then, everyone adjusts their power ratings, and then they start fading Virginia Tech.
Yeah, we do see that sometimes teams off really horrific losses lose the next game as well. Florida State. Coach Merril here. Thoughts on Arkansas? Can they cover today against Oklahoma State? Here was another team early in the week. I said, all right, Arkansas plus 7.5. It's on my long list. Let's take a little bit deeper dive here in what we're going to see from Coach Gundy after last week. I know a lot of people came in on the FCS champion, South Dakota State, and Cowboys took care of business. What are you guys seeing here as far as two-way action? Are you guys seeing it pretty lopsided on this one? I ultimately said, I don't trust this Arkansas team enough to go to Stillwater and get the win.
Yeah, this is, to me, one of the great split games of the week. We've seen money on both sides. Now, sharp money's actually coming on the over. That total was 60, now 61.5. But pretty good split on the game. It's really not going to be a decision one way or the other.
Love it. You guys, he is Art DeCesare from the Westgate Superbook. He's going to be joining us every single Saturday. If you guys have a question for him, you can tweet at him at ArtDice21 over there on X. Art, we always appreciate your insight from behind the counter. And tell John, don't worry, we'll get you back to the risk room now.
I appreciate it, Kelly. We'll talk soon.
Awesome stuff. We will see Chase Michelson tomorrow from the Westgate Superbook. Right now, we're going to bring in Yanni the Greek, who is also joining us every single Saturday and Sunday here on Last Call. We're talking college football today, NFL tomorrow. Before we brought on Art and started the show, VR was going nuts. He said he's getting all this late information. So I think I'm just going to sit back, relax, and let him run.
Yeah, I got a ton of stuff, Kel. I'm going to share it real quick. This is some of the extra games that come in. I never release these to subscribers almost because it's really hard for them to get down because lines move significantly and some books don't even carry it. So it's just not fair for me to release them as premiums, but I try to give as much out because these really do well. So let me share some of those extra game before we get into the real meat. Ball State under 54, McNeese minus 40 or plus 40 and a half, excuse me. Georgia over 62.5, Rhode Island over 45 and plus 24.5, Idaho, Wyoming under 42.5, Nicholls State plus 47.5, and Northern Arizona, Arizona State over 61.5. Again, those I get down for them. It's hard for me even to get down at those numbers, but I do have a little bit of leeway, half point there, half point here, because historically they have done so well. Now, getting into the rest of the board, we've unloaded. Last week, we had a terrible week. Ton of volume, half of it probably weeks before the season even began, and it just did not go the wise guy's way. I think this week will be a little bit different. Week 2, some of the most advantageous. I talked about it a lot. So let's dive right in. I'm going to share everything that we moved and the guys that I share with other traders and runners that move for other groups that we give each other the plays so we can confirm and also see when we're opposite. So here's what I got for you. Ton of gold. Start off with Bowling Green, Penn State. We're going to go over 49 all the way up to 50 on that. Pitt, Cincinnati, over 60.5 all the way up to 62.5. So we kept betting that Pittsburgh, Cincinnati over. Florida Atlantic as well. Laid the 3.5 and laid the 4 on Florida Atlantic over Army. Arkansas and Oklahoma State, there's been a difference of opinion. And that's usually the case because there's, sharp bettors that are going to disagree. It's a zero-sum game. So we saw Raz like the over in Arkansas, Oklahoma State. At about 61, but then another group that I work with came in at the under like 63 on that Oklahoma State and Arkansas. The one side most of the groups agree with was the Oklahoma State side. Anything less than 10, they were looking to get down on Oklahoma State over Arkansas. Drop down to Baylor. That looked like a setup to me because a lot of manipulation happens early on, and I think that's one of those where the real side was Utah. I didn't mess with that one. Drop down to Iowa State plus the 3, and also plus in the first half in that one. Let's move on to, I got nothing but gold here. Oh, South Alabama on the money line and South Alabama minus the points. Georgia, Southern Nevada, they went over 13.5 first quarter. What else can I give you? Arkansas State and Tulsa. Arkansas State minus 6.5. I think that's moved way too much, but the over 31.5 in the first half should still be available. Houston, first half plus the 17.5 and under 27. Also a first half bet. Arizona State later in the night, they laid the 5 there and some 5.5s. USC, Utah State over 14 first quarter. I want to make sure I don't forget some of the real gold. Oh, Colorado plus 7.5. Oregon, a late game. Oregon, this surprised me a little bit because they hit me with Oregon at like minus 18.5. It went up, and I thought I was going to see some take back on Boise State. Instead, the take back either came from another group or maybe some public money as well, because when it dipped, dude, the same group came back and said, get me more Oregon. So they love Oregon today to run up this score. And then over in the Tennessee NC State, that's the writing game. They bet that over first half, over for the game. And yeah, a lot of gold today in college football. Sides, total, everything, Kelly. What else did I forget? Did I give you Florida Atlantic? I gave you Florida Atlantic. I gave you South Alabama. I gave you Arizona State. Cincinnati's on the fence. That's one of those where I haven't pulled the trigger yet, but they did get down a little Cincinnati money line early in the week. So that's pretty much what's been going on leading into today, Kel. Just a lot of college football steam, man. A ton of it.
I love it. Any thoughts from Abby Jackson? Wants to know Washington State -1 versus Texas Tech, or thoughts on the over/under 66.5. We've seen this one bounce back and forth all week in regards to who was the favorite.
A Texas. I like Texas Tech here. I think on a neutral field, I make Texas Tech, believe it or not, close to 6 points better, almost a touchdown better than Washington State. So yeah, I definitely like the Texas Tech side. I think they should be out. At least a field goal would have kept me off that probably. But I do like the Texas Tech side. I don't have much of an opinion on the total there. But yeah, I think this Washington State team's garbage. They opened them up as the favorite. That was a mistake, and that's why you're looking at Texas Tech now as the favorite. The right side's definitely favorite, and I just don't think it's high enough yet.
Yeah, that would make sense to me. Gordon Mathers wants to know two big dogs, Marshall plus 20.5 and New Mexico State plus 22. As we noted from the Westgate, they did say that people were betting Virginia Tech hand over fist, 17.5 all the way up to 20. VR, did you see any Virginia Tech money from your groups?
No. And that's why I saw that move as well and was trying to see whether it was public money or sharp money. But none of the guys that move also for other groups that, like I said, we send each other the stuff. I didn't see Virginia Tech anywhere. So I'm like, is that public money? But then usually when the public, Kelly, knocks a line out of whack, that's when you see the sharps dive in. And seeing nobody take advantage of that, it's got to be a sharp group that's on that Virginia Tech side. Because usually that's what happens. When the public starts moving the line, again, it's a zero-sum game. These groups don't work with each other. Someone would have dove in there and grabbed that plus, and I didn't see it. So the favorite's definitely the sharp side.
The sharp side. That's what VR brings us every single week here on Last Call. We're going to see him tomorrow for NFL. If you guys have a question for VR, drop it in the chat. He's going to share all of the gold every single Saturday here. If you guys don't have anything else for him, though, I'm going to let him go back because I know he has a ton of work to do because kickoff is in.
I got some MMA too. Forget about it. It's on.
You got MMA. Make sure you guys are following him at Greek_Gambler on X as well as Instagram. VR, I cannot wait till NFL Week 1 starts tomorrow. We will see you at noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific tomorrow for that one. Steve Merrill waiting in the wings. Or at least I hope he is. I text him to be on at 11:20. Steve Merrill. What a guy. Love me some Steve Merrill. 2 R's, 1 L, of course, if you're looking for him on social media. Steve is going to take us home here. We're going to answer all of your college football questions, so make sure you guys drop them in the chat. Steve, let's talk about it. I mentioned to start the show I'm selfish, so I like to talk about my plays. I am a little nervous. I have 4 CLV trophies. And normally that would make me feel really good. But last week I had 2 CLV trophies that just got completely blown off the surface of the map. Thank you to West Virginia and Florida for those. But this week I've got 4. Michigan, I have 7.5. I have 14 with Cal from Wednesday. I have 9.5 with Michigan State. And I have 5.5 with Iowa. Tell me which one of those CLV trophies isn't going to matter today.
Oh, wait, we're talking college football? Shoot, I had all my baseball info out here because I'm on a 23-6 baseball run, by the way. Free play, by the way. Free baseball play today on my page at WagerTalk.com.
Give me a free baseball play while we're waiting for the comments to pop in.
I have no baseball best bets. No, I have no baseball best bets today. I'm messing with you because you're messing with me. No, I do have a free baseball play. I put my top opinion free for everybody at WagerTalk.com. 23-6 run will live another day till Sunday, probably Monday, to be honest. We got a lot of NFL tomorrow. The Michigan game is interesting to me, Kelly. I did a deep dive in that in my top 25 video. I do 10,000 game simulation on every game on the board every week, and my projection was Texas by 3.5. The opening line was 3.5. And like you said, it steamed all the way up to 7.5, and then we started to see buyback down to 7, even some 6.5. So I do like your 7.5 with Michigan. My concern in that game, though, is how much Michigan has fallen. Their offense looked very mediocre last week against Fresno, and they're going to have to win a low-scoring game. So I think you can make a case that Michigan and the under are probably somewhat correlated in that big game today.
I would agree. Listen, I had a very lazy handicap this week, and it was just take all the better defenses plus the points that I could find. Yeah. Last week, I spent so much time on week 1, and it didn't even matter. I mean, Wyoming wasn't close. Florida wasn't close. West Virginia wasn't close. Thankfully, on Sunday, USC helped me save some face. If you guys have a question for Steve, drop it in the chat. David Fink wants to know, is the biggest advice still don't change the plan after week 1? Steve, thoughts on overreacting to what we saw in week 1?
Well, you have to be very careful with that in college, more so in the NFL. We'll talk about that after tomorrow. I mean, week one in the NFL correlates so little to the rest of the season. It's crazy. But I will say where you don't change your plan after week one is what my strategy has been for several years now. And I've talked about it for a couple of weeks on my videos and shows is you look to play big favorites. And I had several of them last week. I had Alabama as a best bet for my clients at WagerTalk last week. Also gave it out for free right here on WagerTalk TV in a solo video. That same day, I gave out Texas over Colorado State in a solo video. Don't be afraid to lay the wood with these big favorites in weeks 1, 2, and 3. So I think it's the same game plan this week. I've got several steamroller best bets for my clients right now for Saturday at WagerTalk. And it works for several reasons, Kelly. First of all, early in the season, these are non-conference games. And Ralph Michaels had a great chart a few weeks ago. Guess who has the best week 1 record, September record overall? September is SEC, non-conference games. The worst, the MAC. They get blown out by the big boys. So you really don't have to overthink it. And I've got a little under the radar angle I just came up with a couple weeks ago, Kelly, and I'll throw it out to you. With 30-some states now having legalized sports betting, the point spread's always been there, but the coaches now, it's okay for the coaches to know the point spread. It's like legal everywhere. You got to wonder if they're not going to cover more games late when they know the alums are backing them. And I'll bring up your favorite guy. When I started in the 90s, Bill Snyder, Kansas State. That was an automatic handicap for me in my first few years in the 90s, as I would lay the wood with Kansas State. He would put guys back in to get over the point spread. And I think more teams might start doing that now 25, 30 years later.
Oh, I can totally see that. You're absolutely right. I told them every single time, just lay it with KU. I don't care if it's 34.5, they're going to win by 45. There is a point that has to be made, and that is you have to cover. Abby Jackson wants to know, she said she likes Pitt versus Cincinnati over. Do you agree? Steve, are you a big totals better in college football, or are you more sides like myself?
Yeah, not much totals. In fact, I've really fine-tuned the totals model. In fact, the last 2 years combined, college and pro football sides, I've won more units at WagerTalk than anybody else. And they're like, well, your totals aren't good. Well, it's not that my totals aren't good. I just don't use many of them. And in college football, I use very few of them because I do like to focus, like I said, early in the season here on the sides. I like to look at big favorites. I've used one total this year, and that was that LSU-USC game last week. The two teams were 22-4 combined to the over last year, and that game stays under. And I had to chuckle a little, Kelly, when you said you're playing better defenses last week and you took USC. That just tells you how bad LSU's defense has been in recent years. But this game, if I had to play it, I'd probably look at the over. The sharp money was on the over. It opened as low as 59. We see it up to 63. And some of the leading indicator books are 63.5. So the sharp money is definitely on the over in the Pitt-Cincinnati game today.
Yeah, I believe VR confirmed that as well. We talked about this a little bit with Art DeCesare, Tennessee -9 versus NC State. I mentioned that I have NC State on Monday on my long list. I thought, okay, what are we going to see from this Wolfpack team after an abysmal game one? And then you got Tennessee looking really good. You mentioned week one, you like to lay the big chalk. Steve, I've never hit one of my parlays in week one. Never once in the inception of the last 11 years, 12 years now that I've been doing those parlays. Never hit one week one. Hit one week two out of all that. Week 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 is when those parlays hit. That's just what it is. But I considered the Wolfpack here. Nico looks pretty good for Tennessee. Josh Heupel's got this team rocking and rolling. Maybe, just maybe, they're the play here today.
So this isn't a game I'm involved with, but I did a deep dive in this one also, my top 25 video on WagerTalk TV. And what I pointed out was my game simulation, 10,000 game simulation, had Tennessee on average winning by 6.5 points. Just like that Texas-Michigan game. Where did the line open? 6.5, right on my number, and it got steamed all the way up to 10. We have seen buyback the last couple of days back down to 9, even 8.5. At 10 or more, I like NC State just based on line value, and I think you're right, Kelly. It's an overreaction from last week's blowout by Tennessee, lackluster win by North Carolina State, and I thought 6.5 was the right number. So at 9, there's still value. I liked it better at 10. But I'll just give you a betting strategy depending on which side you like in this game. If you like Tennessee, you play the first half -5. Tennessee's been the best point spread team in the country under Josh Heupel. He was great at UCF as well, covering the first half line. Last week, they were at like a 38-point favorite. They were up 45-0 at the half already. It wasn't even in doubt. If you like NC State, since we don't have a 10 anymore, I would wait. Tennessee gets off to a fast start like they often do. You look at an in-game line. If we can maybe get them at +14 at some point, then I would pull the trigger with the Wolfpack. So it's Tennessee first half, NC State full game, or even better, probably in game at a better price.
Yeah, NC State, Tennessee doesn't start kickoff, until like 7:30 Eastern tonight. So we may get back up there. Lord King Guru, I'm going to get to you here in 1 second because I always neglect the guys on TikTok, but I got this one saved. Runner.runner. With the new college overtime rule, is it worth it to buy off 2.5? I'm guessing he means to 3.
I mean, so few games go to overtime. I think it's one of those things where you can make a point, just always play the over, right? Because if it goes to overtime, your over is going to cash like in most sports. So I think it's one of those things. Sometimes it benefits you, sometimes it doesn't. 3 is still a very key number in college and pro football. If you're new to sports betting, 8 to 9% of the time a favorite's going to win by 3, 4 to 5% of the time they're going to win by 7. It's not like basketball. There are key numbers, and those half points make a tremendous difference on 3, 7, 10. Now, college football, the numbers are a little less key for a couple reasons. First of all, the NFL point spreads are sharper, especially later in the season. They're more accurate. And also the over-unders are higher. So when you have a game like Iowa today, Iowa went from 3 down to 2.5 yesterday in some locations. The over-under is 35. That makes a big difference. And a game is more likely to land on 3 when the total is 35 versus 60 or 70. But yeah, I wouldn't worry too much about that just because of overtime.
All right, we're going to get back to the Army money line question. I'm full disclosure. I was trying really hard to find a 7th for my Splash college football contest. I know that Marco D'Angelo gave out Army +3 the other day, and I said, I agree with Marco, and then just sat right here, opened up my Splash app while VR was talking, and got rid of the Army play because he said that they laid 3.5 and 4 with FAU. I hate being against the Sharps. I really do. I know sometimes we buy into that hype, Merrill. What are your thoughts on Army, FAU? And then also, what are your thoughts on sometimes getting information from certain groups? Maybe you don't, but I get a lot of information. And sometimes it talks you off of something maybe you were not that into and you were going to play just for some action, or maybe you were thinking about it, but they now gave you the nudge to go ahead and click that button.
Yeah, it's such an excellent question, Kelly, because this is my 29th football season as a professional handicapper. I started in 1996. I've been doing this more than half my life. And when I started in the 90s, like when you started, a while ago, it's like newsletters, right? We'd get paper newsletters, online newsletters. And now with the internet, and online, you can get to the click of a mouse, any information you want. You have to be very careful, whether it's the financial markets, the handicap and sports markets, not to get overwhelmed with too much information. So it's very important, I think, first of all, to have your own set of power ratings. You have to have a solid set of numbers, preferably before you see the real point spread. And as I mentioned, once again, I do a 10,000 game simulation for every college game on the board every week. And that's a starting point for me. In this Army game, for example, I've got Florida Atlantic winning by 5. The line's now -1. So it's Florida Atlantic or pass for me in this game based on line value. So then I dig a little bit deeper, and I had some concerns. I think the Army, triple option could give them some trouble. So it's just a pass for me now. But you have to have a solid set of numbers to start. And then maybe you listen to some people you respect or some other handicappers, and that might keep you on a game or get you off a game. Same with my NFL Fade the Public video, which will be up this afternoon here on WagerTalk TV for week 1. We don't just blindly fade the public. In fact, there's 2 very public NFL plays this week I mentioned in the video. I fade one of them, and I actually agree with the other one. And that might keep me off that game. And the other way, if I'm fading a team that I was like lukewarm on and it's really public the other way, I might pull the trigger. So you have to do your own handicapping. It's okay to listen to others, but if you look at 20 different guys, you're going to end up getting plays on both sides and never have a best bet the rest of your life.
Oh, absolutely. You got to do your own research, your own handicapping. I absolutely agree with you there, Steve. I just sometimes have a few people that I respect, especially from the Westgate, when they say things behind the counter, as I mentioned to start the show. Thank God Art gave us Notre Dame and UNLV, kind of just helped salvage my Saturday. Why Mark Zeno is calling me when I'm live on air and why his face is on my phone is awkward. Mark Zeno, WagerTalk.com. Pay attention. Eighth Wonder. Morning, Steve. Syracuse +3 seems to be a sharp side. Thoughts?
Syracuse +3 is a sharp side. That's not a game I'm involved with today. Let me pull up my notes on that one to see. That's an early kickoff at 12 noon Eastern. The Georgia Tech, of course, the win against Florida State maybe is not looking quite as impressive because Florida State laid an egg last Monday against Boston College. Once again, we'll start with my simulation in this game. I've got Georgia Tech by 4. The line is currently 3 across the board. So at 3 or less, probably a little bit of value with Georgia Tech. It did open 1.5. Always reluctant, though. And the reason I left this off my cards, I'm always reluctant to fade Syracuse on the road. They've got the unique setting up there in the Dome. And although Georgia Tech, a little bit familiar with it, After the Florida State game, another game last week, you just feel like this could be a little bit of an off week. Not a great spot probably for a road favorite.
All right. So we've got a question from Trey. Hey, Steve, do you have an opinion on the Oregon State San Diego State game? San Diego State on my long list this week did not make my card. I considered them here. You've got Jonathan Smith now at Michigan State. You've got Oregon State, who is, conference list. Now, while you can't really quantify those two things, I do think that sometimes it does play into how you think your season is going to progress. I thought it was a little interesting. Oregon State was almost a touchdown road favorite in this one.
Yeah, it opened 3.5. I actually project a 5-point win for Oregon State with my simulation, and that's where the line is in some spots, 5 right now in many locations, but there are even some 6s out there. So it's gone from 3.5 up to 5-6. I think it's pretty much priced where it should be. I'd probably focus more on the total in this late game at 10:30 Eastern tonight on Saturday. Open 56. The sharper money has dumped it down to 54 in a lot of spots. And I do think both teams are going to look to run the ball. They both ran the ball pretty well last week. And I think if they keep it on the ground, that could shorten the clock and keep the score lower than expected.
All right, guys, we have 23 minutes until the noon kickoff. As I always say on this show, it is indicative of you. If you have a question, we're going to take it. If you don't have a question, I'm going to end it because I've got some last minute stuff that I want to attend to as well. Steve Merrill, I think we are all out of questions, at least on my end. Anything you would like to leave our audience with?
My simulation favors Kansas State by 12 today, Kelly. So you'll be happy to hear that as a early 8.5-point favorite at Tulane in one of those noon Eastern games.
That does make me very happy because Art confirmed the sharp money once again on Tulane. And if you remember, K-State lost Tulane in Manhattan a couple of years ago as I think they were 12.5, 13-point favorites. So I have a little post-traumatic stress disorder from that. But I appreciate your simulation coming in. You should see this really cool. Yes, I will take it.
That's all that's caused it over the years?
Yeah, I am at my dad's. We're gonna watch the game, and I just hope there's no yelling or excessive F-bombs. We got to find a Zen spot because I'm also going to have the multi-view on because I have money on Michigan. So as much as I care about Kansas State, I care about my bankroll more. You guys, he is Steve Merrill. If you guys have not checked out his Fade the Public video for NFL Sundays over on the WagerTalk YouTube channel, you are missing out. As he mentioned, he breaks down all of it, whether it's not just blindly fading the public, but as to why you should maybe be siding with the public sometimes. Right. Steve Merrill from WagerTalk.com. It has been an absolute and utter pleasure. We're going to see you guys tomorrow. We got Chase Michelson. We've got VR, Yanni the Greek coming back. And we have a special guest on Sunday. I'm not going to tell you guys who it is because you're probably not going to tune in if I told you who it was. Just kidding. It is the Prez. He asked me to come on the inaugural Last Call edition, NFL Last Call edition on Sunday. So he is going to be taking all of your NFL questions. I hope you guys come in hot. Again, thank you guys for following us on your respective social channels. Don't forget to hit that like button. And as always, we appreciate you guys hanging out with us and good luck this week.